All right, we're going to get started this morning with an invocation led by Pastor John McKinnon of First Presbyterian Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Margot Robinson, representing Girl Scouts Troop 380. Please stand.
Let us pray. Eternal justice, eternal mercy, thank you for the gift of life and the opportunity to serve the people of Oklahoma City. Help all those gathered today to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with charity and restraint. We thank you for our city, for the joys and pleasures of this special part of your creation that we are blessed to call home. Thank you for its people. Thank you for its leaders. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate civic responsibilities. We pray for our city council this morning. We pray for them as a body, and we pray for them as individuals. For Mayor Holt and each and every member, we pray they use their authority in your wisdom. Grant to each one wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of welfare and true needs of our people, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, ears to listen to the people they serve, and personal peace in their lives, and joy in the task of public service. Renew us with the strength of your presence and the joy of helping to build a community worthy of the human person. Amen.
Will you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you, Margot. Great job. All right, I call this meeting of the City Council to order, and we are at item 3, Office of the Mayor. One of our honorees today is ill, and so I'm going to ask us to defer item 3C. I also want to ask, is Brian Taylor here? Okay. He's not. Okay, so I think we're also going to defer item 3A then as well. So I know it seems ceremonial, but nevertheless, there is our resolutions on the agenda, so we actually do need to take a vote to defer these items 2 weeks to February 15th. Can we do those with one vote, just to vote two of them together? Okay, so this would be a motion to defer item 3A and 3C 2 weeks. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously, and now I'll make my way to the front to make some other presentations. Thank you, sir. Okay, why don't we have Allied Arts come forward? Yeah, you know the drill, like you haven't done this 25 times. So, once again, it is time to honor the arts in our community and celebrate them and raise money for them. So, we want to hear a little bit about Allied Arts Month, and so I would ask the clerk to read this proclamation.
Whereas the arts enhance every aspect of life in Oklahoma City, contributing to economic development efforts, enriching our quality of life, driving tourism, and exerting a profound positive influence on the development of our youth. And whereas youth arts education helps to foster discipline, creativity, imagination, self-expression, and problem-solving skills, while also helping at-risk students find their unique voice and path in life. And whereas Allied Arts has served as the champion of Central Oklahoma's cultural community and has infused more than $82 million to enhance our city's quality of life since 1971. And whereas Allied Arts distributed more than $5.5 million over the last 2 years in support of 45 arts nonprofits, including relief assistance in response to the devastating effect of COVID-19 on cultural programming and operations in partnership with the City of Oklahoma City. And whereas the month of February is recognized as Allied Arts Month by the Oklahoma City Mayor and Council, local businesses and nonprofits, and the community at large in recognition of the organization's vital support for our cultural community. Now therefore, I, David Holt, Mayor of the City of Oklahoma City, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2022 to be Allied Arts Month in Oklahoma City, and call upon citizens to celebrate and promote the arts and culture in our community and to encourage greater participation in the arts by all citizens.
Well said. Couldn't have said it better myself. And it is definitely a pleasure that we're kind of enjoying the arts again. Many of the arts, not all, but many of them have to be enjoyed in group settings, sometimes indoors, but we're now finally able to do that again in Oklahoma City, and that's been most welcome. And it is worth noting, as was noted in the proclamation, all the work you guys did to pull our arts agencies through the pandemic, and thank you for that. We would all love to hear a little bit from President and CEO of Allied Arts, Deborah McAuliffe Center.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Well, we certainly come during a time that's been the most difficult and the most trying for our arts organizations. However, we do have a plan to restart, re-energize, and rebuild the arts in an even stronger way. And we remain very grateful for the many levels of partnership that we have with the City of Oklahoma City. Our most recent partnership is with the distribution of $1 million of much-needed ARPA dollars for nonprofit arts groups struggling from the pandemic. And we're working with the employees of the City of Oklahoma City, answered the call with our highest, and also with the city employees answering a call with the highest, one of our highest workplaces once again. You guys hold the record for Heart of the City, and all of those city employees working to support the arts in the community. It's been phenomenal. We have such strong leadership this year. We're very proud to have Councilwoman Sodie Clements and her husband Robert Clements leading the campaign, as well as our friend Steve Mason chairing Allied Arts. And this year we will honor Phil and Kathy Busey, who have been long-term supporters of the arts in our city and also founders of one of the most successful nonprofit music programs and tutoring programs for our Oklahoma City schools, El Sistema. We hope to surpass our last year's record-breaking total that was $3.6 million. And we do that through a number of ways, certainly that campaign, and then also businesses are supporting us. During the month of February, we have several businesses that are doing their part to restart the arts, one of which is Tiff's Treats, because Tiff's Treats has a give back program now through February 11th. Tiff's Treats will donate 20% of all orders using the code AART20. I mean, who doesn't love warm cookies right out of the oven? They got up early this morning, made a special delivery for City Council and the Mayor.
This is our first Oprah moment here at City Council meeting. You get a cookie, and you get a cookie, and you get a cookie. Actually, I don't know if any of you are getting cookies, but it looks like the council's getting cookies. Wow, well, thank you very much, Deborah, and that's a great way to start the morning. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you to your team up here, and we're just always so blessed by all that you give back to our community. Let's hear it for Allied Arts. Okay, and we do want to recognize our Kiwanis Club Firefighter of the Year, Battalion Chief Smith, if you wouldn't mind stepping forward and joining me up here. Come right here. I want to be clear, this is not, you're not Firefighter of the Month, week, or day. You're Firefighter of the Year. And so we want to learn a little bit more about you, and so I would ask the clerk to read this resolution.
whereas Battalion Chief Jason Smith has been a city employee for 31 years and is the Battalion Chief of Support Systems for the Oklahoma City Fire Department. And whereas Battalion Chief Jason Smith provides supervision and leadership to the dispatch, IT, facility maintenance, and HR work sections for the Support Services Division. And whereas Battalion Chief Jason Smith oversees and supervises multiple work sections, assisting in developing and monitoring the Support Service Division budget. And whereas Battalion Chief Jason Smith has served to guide the entire division to levels of efficiency, caring, and competence rarely seen in public or private organizations. And whereas Battalion Chief Jason Smith has transformed many major crucial sections within his division. And whereas Battalion Chief Jason Smith has shown leadership and work ethic that has been a palpable positive influence on the 52 men and women in the support division. And whereas this council desires to recognize Battalion Chief Jason Smith for his dedication, professionalism, and commitment to the residents of the city of Oklahoma City. Now therefore be it resolved by the mayor and council of the city of Oklahoma City that they do hereby thank and commend Battalion Chief Jason Smith, 2021 South Oklahoma City Kiwanis Club Firefighter of the Year.
Wow, well, thank you. And 31 years, what an amazing record of service to our city. Thank you for that. This is a resolution, so we actually want to pass this. So I would ask the council to make a motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. I would like to vote aye. Resolution passes unanimously, of course. My first question is, what treats have you brought us? Nothing? Oh, okay. All right. Well, all right. That's fine, I guess. Little breaking with the norm, but fair enough. Well, we would, however, love the treat of hearing a few words from you. And again, we express our deepest gratitude to you and all the men and women of the Oklahoma City Fire Department for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I really appreciate this honor. It's very much appreciated that the fire chief and Chief Smiley as well. I am not the only one who deserves recognition. There's, after 31 years, I've seen a lot of folks come and go, and our fire department is full of employees who are dedicated and trustworthy and mean a lot to the citizens of Oklahoma City, mean a lot to them. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, let's hear it for him. By the way, Chief Smith, don't run off yet. I believe we have your wife and parents here, right, as well? You want to introduce them?
Yes, this is my wife, Corrine. She's also been married to me for 31 years. Actually, 32. Sorry, I was a year off. And this is my mom and my dad, Karen and Earl Smith. And my dad, Earl, he was also a firefighter, and he retired in 1989.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That is yours. Thank you. Okay. That concludes office of the mayor. Now we are moving on to items from council. Item 4A is an ordinance on final hearing. So this is the third meeting of this ordinance proposal. This amends the zoning and planning code, chapter 59, et cetera, as it relates to chickens and quail. We've had some presentations on this previously. Do we have anyone sign up to speak? Okay, we do. Do the authors, council members Hammond, Nice, Carter, Cooper, do they wish to just go right into the comments? Okay. Then we have Andrew Ox. Just that one.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Andrew Oaks. My wife and I live at 2119 Northwest 18th Street here in Oklahoma City, and I serve on the leadership team for SSM Health St. Anthony here in the city. I have the pleasure of serving as our ministry's Regional Director of Mission Integration. In that role, one of my responsibilities is to ensure that as a Catholic ministry, we're doing all we can to care for the most poor and vulnerable members of our city. This past year, I served on a task force with our city's other three health systems and the city-county health department to conduct a community health needs assessment. One of the principal needs we identified was, no surprise, food insecurity. Urban agriculture is in St. Anthony's DNA. In the early days of our ministry, the sisters had a small farm on the land where our hospital still stands at 10th and Lee. Along with produce, they also had chickens and a cow, which was stolen but then subsequently returned. And they used this farm to feed the poor of our city. Today, we're continuing in the sisters' footsteps by advocating for urban agriculture in our city. We've already helped establish an urban farm on our campus in Midtown. Just produce, no illegal chickens or quail at this time. We're also advocating for a change in the city's zoning laws to allow urban hens and chickens to increase access to a healthy, sustainable food source for our neighbors, especially those who are most vulnerable, immigrants, refugees, and those who live in poverty. One of the public health resources we use in community health is a tool called County Health Rankings, a resource provided by the University of Wisconsin's School of Medicine and Public Health. This resource lists evidence-based resources to address health disparities, including food insecurity. Zoning regulations to increase access to urban hens and quail is one of the public health strategies recommended by this industry standard best practice, citing evidence from 16 reputable sources, including the CDC, the cities of Madison, Boston, and Cleveland, and the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. As the oldest hospital in this city, and as a Catholic health ministry advocating for the poor, we're here to ask you to increase access to this sustainable food source in our community by voting for this change to the city's ordinances on urban hens and quail. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is final consideration. What do the authors wish to do?
Mayor, if I could, real quickly.
Yeah, sure. We've got some motions, but let's do a debate.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
I was just curious if anyone might be interested in possibly amending the distance from adjacent dwellings. 30 feet is pretty close to have a gaggle of chickens out there from your bedroom window. And I was really just curious if anyone would be open to discussing that in regards to the authors of the ordinance.
I'm more than happy to discuss it. What are your thoughts on how many feet?
I mean, really, I would like to see like 75 feet. If we don't think that's doable, then I would at least like to see that expanded to maybe 60 feet. As someone that's raised chickens and had them in a pretty close proximity, I would say, to the guest bedroom window, anyone that stayed there during the night would always, the next morning, chickens woke me up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, so.
Well, that's how you ensure they don't stay longer.
I didn't mind it, that's why I stuck it over there. But if I had a neighbor and had chickens 30 feet from the window, they get pretty loud. And I know we're not doing roosters. I didn't do roosters because of the noise, but with hens, one of those hens turns into or acts like the rooster. And they'll sit there and crow at daybreak. Not quite as loud as a rooster, but they will make the noise. So
I think as one of the authors of this that I'm sure there's a way for us to find a healthy compromise. I'm going to start at 50.
Actually, 50 is what I was thinking too.
I thought we'd split it down the middle at 70.
Anybody else?
I guess my concern with changing it at this point is that we've had, over a month, 6 weeks to discuss this, and it's not come up yet. And this is just that it has to be at least 30 feet. Some people might opt to do more, but I've already heard concerns from people who reached out and said, my lot is not even big enough to do this. So I think it like potentially further restricts how people's just kind of ability to do what they want on their own property, but also, I have loud horns or trucks that go by my window and they wake me up. That's just part of living in a city. And I think, dogs barking at night, or there's other things that already, again, it's like I understand trying to find that balance between, not encroaching too much on our neighbors, but also allowing folks to do, I don't know. I think that's just my thought with changing it from 30 is that it says at least, which gives people the opportunity to do more and maybe talk to their neighbor if they are being woken up by chickens and find that compromise on their own versus us telling them to do that when, again, I've already heard concerns that this is too restrictive for a lot of folks, given that the shape and size of their lot and how it comes up against other people's property lines and structures.
Right. And this deals not with property line, but with the dwelling that they live in.
Well,
So
and
I guess that's
also,
my
I mean,
concern.
it is from rear property lines as well as the adjacent dwelling.
It's 10 feet from rear property lines, which I'm fine with, but the 30 feet is just adjacent dwellings.
Yeah, and that's
mean,
what I'm
looking at the
saying, is the people
ordinance.
who've reached out to me, it's like they might live on a lot that is an odd shape, and so their rear property line is also, they just don't have any room to go, essentially, because of adjacent dwellings and then their rear property line. So, again, I'm concerned that restricting it further just cuts people out, and when they could kind of maybe make those adjustments on their own. Because it's not saying it's only 30 feet. They could go 50, 70 feet if they have that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just won't be able to support it at 30 feet.
I'd like to see us try to compromise if we could. If you want to make a motion, I'll second it and we'll see where it goes.
Hold on, please. Point of order, because
Yeah,
we're
just
still in this
procedurally, no.
discussion.
Procedurally, we currently have a motion on the table for passage, so.
And we're in the point of discussion. So with this point of discussion, I would have to ask, how come someone didn't talk about this within the last few weeks, as far as us being able to find out what we needed to do and work together to get to today? It's very frustrating that we went through one introduction, a whole public hearing, and it was weeks in between, and now we're having this conversation about the square footage of how the distance of these coops and these dwellings. That's disappointing that we can't have these types of conversations, these simple conversations amongst the ones who are here and the ones who have created this ordinance as a group and as a body. So that's the frustrating part about having to go through this on this day, when, again, I can understand us having the introduction of this and we're all having the conversation at that time, but we're the third hearing in, and now we're trying to just totally dismiss it and change it and amend it, and that's not fair to the process of us being able to have these conversations equally and together, instead of having these pockets of where now let's go out there and do this. That's not what this body should be doing. We should be having these conversations together, and I would have hoped that as the council member and you having all of this knowledge, that we could have been able to talk about this a lot further and a lot more in depth than us having this conversation right now.
So thank you for that, because I have talked to people. I've also looked for input from different people around the community.
Council members? Council members? Because I don't recall talking to you about
Oh, I didn't talk to you about it.
Okay.
I didn't
and
realize.
and I'm an
if I
author of
question-
it.
If I'm questioning something that's coming in front of us, I didn't realize that I need to specifically focus on you on that.
It's
And
a
I'm not-
courtesy to talk to the council members who are actually bringing this forward, don't you think?
Yeah, there's 4 of you.
It's 3.
I thought it was 4.
Just became 4, so
Let's see,
excuse me for
1, 2, 3,
that.
there is 4.
This whole time until today, it's been 3.
This is a question that we can sit here and
Okay,
discuss
so
civilly.
let's stay
Without
focused.
hopefully attacking each other, but
Yeah.
I didn't mean to disappoint you.
I'm
so
not attacking
I
you.
apologize for disappointing
Did
you.
I ever attack? I haven't attacked. I just said it's quite disappointing that we can't have this type of conversation collectively.
Can we get
And no,
back
you
to
don't
the
have to
Yeah,
talk
we've got
to
to
me.
get back on the ordinance. We have a motion on the table for passage unamended.
May I just would like to add, as the new 4th member supporting this ordinance, which also comes about because I was, like, the last meeting was really for me the most important one because I heard from residents in my ward, who not just heard from them, they came and spoke and they reached out to, well, you remember, you were here. But for the folks following at home who might not have seen that meeting, several Ward 2 residents came after doing research where they reached out to municipalities of comparable size to find out how similar ordinances have played out there. And I just walked away from that, not just a supporter, but someone who wanted to put my name beside it. I hear your concern. I also hear what Councilwoman Hammond is saying about, and I hadn't even thought about it until you mentioned the different noises, the dogs. Or like when I'm walking from my house to Holy Rollers on a Saturday at noon, y'all know what I'm about to talk about, and that siren just goes off like we're living in the 1950s Cold War, you know? It's just part of being in a city, and I think that that's where code enforcement can be helpful. So I think, in my mind, the compromise is that should we start receiving significant concerns from residents after passing it this way, I would like to see us come back if necessary, and then we start amending, I hear you, Councilman, say, the 50 or something like that. I do think, to Councilwoman Nice's point, I think my discomfort in right now amending it is that so much of that research I heard from Ward 2 from Ward 2 residents helped make me feel comfortable with it as it is right now. And if I'd heard these sorts of, and I do appreciate the comments, if I'd heard them during that time, it would have helped me better, understand how to amend accordingly. Right now, I don't feel as comfortable with that. And I think my personal compromise would be that, and what I would present to us would be that should we receive some of the concerns like you're talking about at a level that we just find, upsetting and needing to amend, then I think we come back and then I think we try and amend this to the different feet standard. That's kind of where I'm at, just hearing this conversation. If anyone has any questions about that, please feel free to ask, but that's where I'm at.
Okay. So Councilman Carter, you have a little bit of power here right now. You have made a motion, and unless you withdraw that motion, we will vote on passage unamended. Withdrawal of the motion would allow for the motion of an amendment.
Councilwoman Hammond and I went back and forth over a number of these different things and looking at it to make sure that we didn't exclude a lot of people. The whole point in what we drew this up for was to make sure that we did include as many people as we possibly could. Even at 30 feet, we are excluding some people. And I have to agree with their arguments. I did talk with Councilman Stone, but it was about 10 minutes before this meeting.
We've talked previously too.
But as it stands, I think I want to leave it as it is.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second for passage of item 4A. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Passes 6-3. All right. Now we're at item 5, city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have a few items on today. We don't have any formal presentations, but I did just want to make a couple of comments on these reports. First, we have our investment report on. We won't go through that, but I just want to acknowledge the work that our Finance Department Treasury Division do to manage the city's funds. It's a significant portfolio that they manage, so I just want to acknowledge that and appreciate their work to protect the city's funds and invest them wisely. We have the sales tax report that is on. We continue to have extremely strong sales tax growth. We are at 20%, a little over 20% on growth in this month. Overall, we're at 18% growth for the year, so very, very strong growth. Combined sales and use tax are about $24 million above the budget. We are working together internally, and we'll have some more discussion about it next week at the budget workshop, looking at a budget amendment for this year that we'll be discussing with the council at a later time. Hotel tax collections report is also on here. Hotel tax collections, the sales tax report is through January. The hotel tax collections are through December. And I just want to recognize here that in this report, it shows that we're about 62% above the prior year. And you just know it was so bad last year with COVID. If you back up 2 years, we're about 4% above where we were against FY20. So it's a little bit lower than what normal growth would have been annually going forward, but still a great sign where the hotel industry is and where travel is right now by comparison to where we were a year ago and even 2 years ago. We're about 4% above where it was 2 years ago. So still really good indicator there. And then we've got the interim financial report that is through December. This really does a comparison. It'll do some comparison between actuals and budget, but also looks at revenues versus expenditures. And right now, our revenues are about $29 million above expenditures. There'll be a lot of things that will change between now and the end of the year. But again, this will be a part of our conversation in the budget workshop, as well as when we move forward and look at a budget amendment. And that's all that I have on city manager reports. Yes.
And I'm guessing this is already coming next Tuesday. But when we hear that economic report, I would anticipate a section sizable on the ways in which inflation are contributing.
Absolutely.
And not
It's
contributing.
definitely a contributor, but how much of it, definitely it's not 100% of that growth.
Mm-hmm.
There's other factors that are there, and Russell will definitely go through that.
Okay.
Yep.
And something else I'd be curious about, because I know this is kind of a historic moment for that inflation, is, and he would be better than I would ever be at it, I'd like to learn more about other moments in time where we have faced similar kind of inflation inflections.
Okay.
And it would just be very helpful. for
Right,
me.
so it's, we have the experience of, that's one of the benefits of sales tax. The fact that it's tied closely to the economy can be a danger for us, but the fact that it does move with inflation helps us because our costs are going up as well, our own costs, just like residents' costs. And so we'll definitely have some discussion about that.
Thank you, City Manager.
You bet.
Okay, that brings us to Journal of Council Proceedings. We have items A and B we could take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 7, request for uncontested continuances. So item 9BH is already deferred to February 15th. 11G is withdrawn. 11AH is deferred to February 15th. What else do you have, Mr. City Manager?
We have several other items here, starting on page 11, item 11T. This is SPUD 1362. We need to strike this item so that we can go back and correct the notices that were sent. So that's going to be stricken, and it'll be brought back once it's properly noticed. On page 14, item 11AF1, unsecured structures. All of these items we will strike from the agenda. Item B, 4709 South Bypass Terrace, the owner is secured. Item E, 3125 North McKinley Avenue, the owner is secured. Item F, 1101 West Reno Avenue, the owner is secured. Item K, 1606 Northwest 33rd Street, the owner is secured. Item L, 2100 Northwest 34th Street, the owner is secured. Item N, 623 Southwest 48th Street, the owner is secured. Item P, 521 Southeast 79th Street, this is now occupied. And then on page 14, under 11AG1, abandoned buildings, item C, 4709, these are all stricken from the agenda as well. Item C, 4709 South Bypass Terrace, the owner is secured. Item D, 1101 West Reno Avenue, the owner is secured. Item H, 2100 Northwest 34th Street, the owner is secured. Item I, 623 Southwest 48th Street, the owner is secured. And item K, 521 Southeast 79th Street, this is now occupied. And that's all the items I have.
All right. Okay, item 8 is revocable permits and events. Item 8A is revocable permit with the Pop-Up Entertainment and Events Group for the OKC Pop-Up Series Hello Spring Festival, April 8th through the 10th. And we do have Laura McNett.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for your time. My purpose today is to seek approval for the revocable permit to bring a second festival I should say another festival in our series for 2022. The purpose of the series is two-part. Again, to provide fun, family-friendly outdoor entertainment, to bring more of those experiences to Oklahoma City. And for this year, focusing primarily on bringing that to the South Oklahoma City area, a great part of Oklahoma that just has not been as much of a target for festivals and these type of events. Our second purpose is to offer support and opportunities for independent business owners. And so it's our aim to provide a springboard for them. And I think it'll be interesting to see what type of partnerships and relationships and things will come about during the year with that. But it's still to be known.
Councilman Greenwell? Sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor, and I'm looking forward to this, and hopefully we'll get used to these kind of events in South Oklahoma City, maybe gain a little of sophistication down there. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I move approval.
All right, got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, now we're going to recess the council meeting and convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have items A through G we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Now we'll adjourn OCMFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, where we have items A through E we could take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCPPA and reconvene as the council meeting, where we find ourselves on page 3 of your printed agenda, item 9, the consent docket. And there's a presentation at item BJ, and that is the only scheduled presentation. Are there any other items that a council member wishes to pull out for separate comment or separate vote?
Mayor, can we pull out item S as a separate vote? I need to recuse myself.
Okay.
Item 8S.
Okay. AS, S is in Sam.
Sam, correct.
Mayor, I'd also just like to hear from city staff an update on item AJ, please, and AR.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Anything else? All right, let's start with the separate vote item. Councilman, if you want to step out. So this is going to be item 9S. And we're going to vote on this separately if a council member wishes to make a motion. Got a motion and a second? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, we're back on the agenda and the remainder of the consent docket, and we'll take them in order. And that would bring us to item AJ, Councilman Cooper.
Wonderful. This is an item which has appeared before us previously at different iterations, and I just would like, because it's a super span project, and I would say the name actually kind of fits how big I think ultimately in importance this is. Just wanted to provide residents with an update about where we are from that. So I don't know if Director Winger could speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Councilman. Eric Winger, Public Works Director. So the item that you have today on this is the approval of the construction contract to make a series of repairs to one of the largest drainage facilities in Oklahoma City. And we do refer to it as the Super Span. It's an underground drainage system that actually is in the vicinity of Penn Square Mall. It extends from Belle Isle Boulevard and Northwest Expressway all the way to the east back to Classen Boulevard. I mean, it provides from overflow drainage relief. It's been in service for almost for decades, and it actually is requiring repairs. It's been repaired before. So with the award of the contract today at $1.6 million, there'll be some critical repairs made to parts of the structure. There are some structural components, some cracked concrete, and some other things that are inside this tunnel that require repair. It won't cause any street closures because it's completely underground, and all the work will be done from the inside of the pipe. We're planning to start work this spring. It'll finish up late 2022.
This might sound like a no-brainer question, but for residents, what's the significance? Like, what will they? How will this project benefit them, the folk who are in that vicinity, or maybe even just outside of that vicinity?
The drainage project itself was actually created when Interstate 44 was constructed many, many years ago, and it provides for drainage of the entire area around Penn Square Mall, the Belle Isle development that's there, all along Northwest Expressway to Classen Boulevard. So in the absence of making these repairs, we would be subject to flooding. It is a unique structure. It's required some periodic repairs in years past. The structure is so large, you can actually drive a vehicle through it. So to give kind of size, this is not your typical neighborhood or even an arterial street drainage system. And it's one that's just necessary for repair. We did try to bid this once before. It was a complicated project. We had to reject those bids, but the good news is we did receive bids on January 5th that were within the budget, and that's the recommendation today, is to go ahead and proceed with those repairs with this contract.
Wonderful. I really appreciate that historic context and describing its benefits to the folk around the area. Timeline of when we might see this?
So we'll start this spring and we'll finish it by the end of the year.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your work and to the staff for getting us there. I just wanted to make sure I could provide that update to residents.
Eric, are we going to have any kind of traffic impediments or anything during?
So we do not anticipate any traffic impacts because the structure is completely accessible off-street and it's all below ground. So unlike having to dig up the street to get to a drainage system, all the work on this one's going to be done from the inside. There won't be anything that has to be uncovered.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Item AR, Councilman Cooper?
Yes, this is one of our Better Street, Safer City 2017 bond/sales tax extension in MAPS 3, and this project is very important to so many of us who call Ward 2 home. And so I just wanted to hear a bit of an update on why this particular item is before us today.
Sure. I'm happy to update on this one as well. So this is Northwest 39th Street Enhancement Project. It's in the vicinity of Northwest 39th and Pennsylvania Avenue. It is Better Streets. It's work that's been underway for almost a year. It's actually ending construction this spring, so we're actually near the end. With the change order and amendment that you have before you today, there are certain items that they're going to be including and some changes to landscaping, some of the irrigation systems, and some of the electric facility. They've also added a few days to the contract just due to some of the additional materials, some weather, and some other activities that have occurred. But as I mentioned, the good news is we're nearly completed. It'll finish up this spring, 2022.
Thank you for that update. I remain infinitely proud of your staff for your work here. Though I wish the delays weren't there, we can't control the weather and supply chain stuff, but I really appreciate you and that update.
Okay. And Councilwoman Nice, item AS.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that this is actually Ward 6 and 7 and not Ward 7 and 8 as far as Bricktown Police Station and 219 East Main Street and 700 Call Court and Processing Center renovation 701 West Main Street, unless we've changed boundaries and we don't know.
So,
Or we are redistricting,
so
but I don't know
noted.
it went that far. Thank you.
okay, I'll note as we pass it by that item BH was deferred, and then item BJ has a presentation.
Yes, Aubrey McDermott, one of our assistant city managers, is going to present this. If you remember, back in September, we had the council approved a plan for how we would use the city's ARPA funds, the allocation of funds to the city. We've been working on some agreements and contracts for portions of that plan. Aubrey's going to talk a little bit about the plan, but then also talk about this is a first allocation of projects that we're using from the revenue replacement, because a portion of that was set aside for revenue replacement for revenues that we had lost during that time, during the time of COVID, the initial effects of COVID. So I'm going to let Aubrey take us on this and present the projects that we have before you today.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As Craig mentioned, back in September, when Council approved our strategy and our plan for spending our funds, we followed the ARPA guidelines that were set forth, and we created categories that we could spend funds within. So what we're talking about today is the first of the three categories that we had, and just as a refresher, those categories were the revenue replacement category, a response to negative economic impacts, which includes several different measures that you could do to support small business, nonprofits, and economic development, and response to the public health emergency. So today what we're talking about is that first category that you see on the table in red. This is restoring government projects, infrastructure, and services. So under the ARPA revenue loss category, we are able to use these funds for doing things like modernizing IT department hardware and software, maintenance of buildings or new infrastructure like roads, drainage, and sewer, and other capital improvements. The allocation that we set forth was around $78.5 million for this. So the other thing I'd remind you of in that resolution is we set forth some guiding principles. The ARPA funds really tend to be best used as a temporary nature of funds. And what I mean by that is that we want to avoid creating new programs or doing things that are going to require ongoing financial commitments to the city. So this really lends itself to specific capital projects that can be completed within the time frame. Infrastructure needs is another category, so that we do look at critical infrastructure, and we need to be strategic in that we're looking at building long-term assets that provide benefits over many years. And I know many of you have heard my analogy here about when CARES first came out, we were really trying to triage, stop the bleeding. We were handing out apples to people who were hungry. Now what we're trying to do with these funds with ARPA is plant the orchards that are going to feed people for generations. So it's really a long-term investment and long-term needs. The third category was trying to coordinate efforts. We don't want to duplicate efforts. There are a lot of different pots of funding that are available for different things, including the state's own ARPA fund process. So we want to make sure that we're using our funds to the best ability of the city. And then the fourth category is we need to make sure that we can spend the money in the time frame that's allotted by ARPA. So this means that we want to make sure that we can pace projects throughout the funding period. It's through December 31st of 2024, and then we need to make sure that the projects are completed by December 31st of 2026. So that gives us a pretty short window for getting projects done. So what we did is we relayed this information to city departments. We defined that criteria. And over time, our departments have kept up long lists of needs within the city. These lists have been created through different timeframes and processes. We've gathered information from the public through our different GO bond processes. We've kept up with lists as council members have called about needs in their ward or things that have popped up over time. Departments themselves know of critical infrastructure needs that are coming up. So those departments kept the list. We asked them to submit their top 5 projects to the city so that we could evaluate how much that came to. Well, it came to an astronomical amount of money, as you can imagine. With only $78 million in this pot of funds to spend, there were millions and millions of dollars over that in needs. So what we did is we implemented a process to evaluate priority of those projects to narrow it down to something that we could afford within our budget. And in the past, we have used multiple criteria to raise projects up to the top of the priority list. We've done this with the GO bond process. We've used it for Better Street, Safer City. So we created some criteria and we evaluated those projects, and then we ranked the projects by that priority that we came up with. And I know that we've gone over this before. There were, I think, 14 different categories that we considered as priorities for the use of these funds. Gave them scores from 1 to 10 for each of these categories. Some of those categories include considerations for things like, how big of an impact does this project make on the population? Is it a critical need? Does it have a public health or public safety component? Does it help us fill gaps or create efficiencies in our operations? Does it help us generate economic development opportunities? Does it keep us safe in terms of economic enhancement or cybersecurity enhancement? We also considered whether or not ARPA was the best fit for funding for the project. If there were other funding sources available and that project wasn't critical in nature, that project didn't score as high on it should be funded by city ARPA. So we tried to evaluate all of these projects and came up with a list. And what we're here today to present is these are the projects that ranked at the top of the list. This isn't the full list of projects that we evaluated, but this is only the first $43 million worth. And one of the things I noticed when we were going over these top projects that were ranked is they covered a lot of different categories. So I just put these into 4 obvious categories. It spans from critical infrastructure, different public safety and cybersecurity needs, transportation infrastructure, and improvements to parks and recreation and neighborhoods. So I know that we went over each of these in detail. I have detail here if you have any questions about those specific projects. Just to highlight a few of critical infrastructure is some of these projects were things that had come up after, for example, a GO bond issue identified them. So bridges, for example, that came under serious disrepair, things that we didn't have a funding source for, things that we hadn't evaluated needed to be replaced rather than repaired. There are certain projects here that we've already committed to through different GO bond projects that came in above their budget. So in order to make those shortfalls happen, there was no other source of funds available, and this really helps us get those development-ready projects that we can complete within the time frame out the door. Public safety improvements for fire. There are sidewalks, bike lanes, and trails on this list that are priorities in our community. Wiley Post Park, Cameron Park, and some neighborhood improvements in the Capitol Hill area. So some of the considerations for requesting just $43 million of our top projects today is that we do have to obligate these funds by December 31st. We'd like to get approval to start on these projects as quickly as possible instead of waiting until we know more answers about other things, including some of the projects that we have applied to fund through the state and through ACOG. There are several major projects we'd like to receive state funding for. We also have some street enhancement projects that we'll be learning this month whether or not ACOG supports. So without that knowledge of knowing how those other funding sources might come to the support of Oklahoma City, we didn't want to commit the full list of the full $78 million for your consideration. We just want to hold back some of those funds until we know what that situation is. But we do want to get those projects going. So what we're asking for today is just this preliminary list of projects that uses up about $43 million of the $78.5. And then as we find out more, come back to you later and figure out the next steps. And my colleague Kenton Soodle isn't here today, but we do have a lot of people that have been working on this that can help answer questions if you have any questions, and I'm here to answer questions now if you have any.
I would note also that as these come back, so this would be an approval, so we approved a plan back in September. This would prove an allocation to these projects. Many of these, if you look at the size of these projects, will involve contracts. So any of those that involve contracts would also come back to the council again. So it may not be the last time that you see this. We may talk about this again, and you might see these again. But this sets the allocation of funds to allow us to move forward.
Any questions?
Assistant City Manager McDermott, thanks for your presentation. And then this might sound nitty gritty, but just a question because it's pretty heavy on my mind. Do we know on the affordable housing component, for instance? I recall last year I was able to work with staff to do a virtual town hall on existing programs the city has when it comes to housing, like our down payment assistance program, our housing rehab program. I've spoken with some Ward 2 residents who live in some of the homes that Jefferson Park helped build over in Military Park. And one of the things they told me was they had to go through, it wasn't even like a financial literacy class, it was just like home ownership, like weeks of like learning what insurance and what proper maintenance, all these different things. So in some ways, yeah, I guess financial literacy. Point being, I love all of these things. I love preparing people to be homeowners. I love the down payment assistance program and also the rehab. I'm wondering, how does any of this come with the possibility of, at the city level, being able to invest further in those sorts of programs that we have so that we can better prepare our local residents to become homeowners and Yeah, no, that's my big question right now.
So we haven't fully developed that housing component for the city's ARPA funds yet. I think that the intention was that we would maximize that funding to actually complete housing projects. The service part of it, though, the education, the capacity building, all of that stuff is stuff I know that a lot of different agencies and entities know the need exists and are working on programs for that. And then the Planning Department's Community Development Housing Division is a great resource for that. They have separate funds, for different programs, and I can check with them to see if some of the funding that's come in for ARPA could be used for those types of homeowner education programs. But right now, I think that what our intention was on the housing is to get a head start with ARPA funds, because they would be available faster than perhaps the MAPS housing funds for critical need housing projects. So until that is brought forward, I think I can work on figuring out if we have funds available through other sources for those things.
Thank you for that.
Happy to do that.
Will you answer give us an example of a critical need housing project?
So these would be ones that we would be able to do within our ARPA timeframe, which is pretty fast for building housing projects. And we were going to go back and reference our housing study that was completed within the last year by our housing consultant that has looked at what housing exists in Oklahoma City and what the demands are for housing types. They've identified gaps in the housing market for certain types of critical housing needs. We want to prioritize that and look at how we can leverage this ARPA funding to get that housing on the ground. Some of those projects might be quick and easy projects because they could be rehabbing existing units to get them ready for housing rather than building brand new housing structures, which could take longer.
It just sounds like there's already an idea of where or an example, and that's actually what I'm asking for.
Yeah, we do have some projects that the city's been working on for a long time. One that I can recall off the top of my head is maybe close to 20 years ago, the city purchased property on the north side of 10th Street over between Blackwelder, off of Blackwelder by the VA hospital, cleared those sites and did multiple attempts to get developers to bring in affordable housing on those lots, and it never happened. So the hindrance of developing those parcels has been because you have to bore underneath 10th Street to get water to the site. That's an expense for an affordable housing developer that's just too much to make the project work. So there are some infrastructure types of projects that can help housing projects move forward that we do know exist and that we'll put on our list and go through a process of trying to evaluate those projects and bring those forward so that we can see what's out there and where we need to prioritize those funds.
So we're supplementing funding for, sounds like urban renewal to be able to extend there?
That's a city site for that one. There may be other sites that could make housing development ready that could come forward through that process. So there could be some housing authority or urban renewal sites on the list. I envision that what we'll do is come up with some criteria for the housing category and do a similar process of seeing what we have and trying to figure out the best fit for the funding that's available, which I think is only about $8 million.
Okay. My second question is pertaining to, I know we all had these conversations as far as briefings, and we all brought forth some suggestions. I don't see any of those, so I'm just curious, or if I'm the ones maybe that I had asked about, so I'm curious to know, and also considering as we look at Capitol Hill S&I, we're still in the middle of a couple of others that are also located in other areas, specifically Capitol View. And I know there were also some needs for that particular part of our S&I program as well.
So I didn't catch that request to look at the other S&I areas. This request came through planning from the S&I person for these projects in Capitol Hill. But we did reach out to staff about the project that you had asked about in Edwards Park and are looking for sources of funds and have found some source of funds to do some improvements there. So I believe Melinda followed up with you on that.
She did, and the conversation is to be continued because with us to be able to fully complete that project, we're going to need funding, more funding. Mm-hmm. And this type of funding would be able to assist in the efforts of fully completing that field. And the reason this is now a priority is because we're about to lose some other fields on the other side of town. And this will be a place now where we can replace, in some ways, those fields that are going to be lost, and also have a brand new place for our kids to play in a different part of our city, while also, again, that beautification piece of what this could look like overall for this particular park.
Yeah, and I think that for projects coming forward, that we look at other sources of funds. This is the first batch of projects, so there's still, room to evaluate if there are other needs we can meet with ARPA.
Okay, I'd like to just look at and continue that conversation,
Sure.
And happy to do that with you and Ms. Melinda as well.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Aubrey? Okay, we do have a resident who's signed up to speak on this item. Anita Arnold. Ms. Arnold, great to see you. And if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address and keep your remarks to 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Anita Arnold, and I am Executive Director of Black Liberated Arts Center, a 50-year-old fine arts organization, 501c3, who is located, we're located at 4500 North Lincoln Boulevard. And I'm not here so much as to present as I am to get some information from you all. The pandemic has created a lot of change in our organization, and even as we go through, our regional, national, and some local advisors in the fine arts business, in the nonprofit business, are presenting to us some sustainability type ideas, what we must do in order to go into perpetuity of the next 50 years. And so I'm here to really ask the question and get some direction from you as to how to approach, this changing situation with us trying to achieve sustainability in this environment. In the nonprofit arts business, the first question I have is, will you be using the same structure? If you don't have the answer, just point me in the direction where I can go to get the answer. Will you be using the same structure as you did the last time relief funds were available? I know that Allied Arts was new to this body and these funds coming through this body. My question is there a possibility with our changing situation that we can go directly to someone here at the city and apply for some of the projects that will allow us to attain or at least start on the path of sustainability for the next however many years we would like for this organization to be around for many more years?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that I can answer on that. One is that we are doing another allocation that we're working on an agreement with Allied Arts to do another allocation to work with the arts nonprofit agencies. There will be some funding that's available going through a process that's similar to what we did before. We're also in the process right now of reaching out to nonprofits, and we'll make sure Aubrey is helping to lead this. We'll make sure that we have your contact information and we can get in touch with you of what needs there are in the nonprofit sector, whether it's in the art side or it's in the service side. So we're in a process working through that as well, which we're still evaluating with the feedback that we get from the nonprofit agencies, what that additional what those additional allocations might look like. One of the things we've done is we've got an initial agreement that we were working on, we've deferred and we'll be bringing back later to work on doing technical support for various agencies to help with some of those sustainability types of issues that you were talking about. So we are still in that process, and we will make sure before you leave we get your contact information, and we'll make sure that we're in contact with you as we're working through getting feedback from the nonprofits for those needs.
Okay, one other comment I'd like to make. The infrastructure, we received funds the last time under Allied Arts, but some of the work that we find ourselves involved in or beginning to be involved in are not necessarily defined under the terms and conditions of Allied Arts. They fall outside, which is the reason I'm here to ask if there's a possibility, if we've got such projects going forward, whether in fact we can apply directly outside of what they do.
Yeah, and as we're working through the agreement, Amanda was just telling me we're working through the agreement with Allied Arts, and it will be a little bit different than what it was before. So we can talk about those differences as well so that you understand that and see if that's addressing those needs. We also have the limitations that we have to work within the guidelines the federal government provides, but we'll communicate with you on all of that and make sure that we hear what needs you're identifying there that might be able to be addressed in those programs.
Okay, the last question. So that we don't miss out on some opportunities, either with Allied Arts or by going direct. I guess we are well aware that the funds are spread in different places on this money. We are well aware that there will be observations which make sure you don't double dip in the funds coming from others that we might get funds from. We are well aware of that, but I think our upcoming projects fall outside of any of this.
Yeah, we're glad to have the conversation. We'll make sure we have your contact information and that
Okay.
we're in touch with you through this process.
Thank you very
Thank you.
kindly. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Okay, that concludes everything we had for the consent docket. If anybody would like to move forward with its approval. That would, of course, be without the item previously deferred and the item previously passed. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Concurrence docket, rather short today. A through F, we could take with one motion. Item 10. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11, items requiring separate votes. Item 11A is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 1111 North Bryant Avenue, going from R1 to C3. This was deferred from January 18th. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, this was deferred because I wanted to understand what was taking place in this particular area. So I do know now what is going to happen, so I will ask for approval.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Almost. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11B is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 1512 and 1518 Southeast 15th, going from C3 with the AE2 Airport Environment Zone 2 Overlay District to I2 with the AE2 Airport Environment Zone 2 Overlay District. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, this application is for industrial use development, and I know I did have a question or two, but I believe they have been now answered, which also brings to my ask, as far as, I've asked this before if possible, because looking at this area, as you see the C3 and the R1, it shows two structures, and I understand now those structures are no longer there. So it's really hard to be able to understand and decipher what needs to take place when you have on the application and the examples that are presented, unless you go out there and look to understand what it is. But nonetheless, we'll approve it.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11C, this is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 1730 Southeast Grand, going from R1 and I2 to I2. Councilwoman Nice.
I just kept my mic on because I have all of these. This particular request is to consolidate existing mixed residential industrial base for industrial development, so it is compatible with the area. And with that, I will move for approval.
All right, got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 11D is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 3225 Northwest 192nd Street, going from O1 and PUD 1686 to PUD 1786. Councilman Stonecipher.
Thank you, Your Honor. This was approved by planning. There were no protests. I don't believe there's anyone here to speak today, so I'll move for the item's approval, please.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 11E. This is two related items. One is amending the master design statement to the one revised January 3rd of this year, incorporating an agreement between the neighbors and applicant. And then E2 is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 1320 Northwest 178th Street, going from R1 to PUD 1855. Councilman Stonecipher.
Thank you again. Once again, this was approved by Planning Commission. There are no protests. The first thing I need to do is take care of item 11E1, which is the amendment that you referred to. So I'll move for the amendment's approval at this time, please.
All right, we've got a motion to pass 11E1. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
And now, Your Honor, I'd move...
Passed unanimously.
Thank you. And now, Your Honor, I'd move for the approval of the ordinance on final hearing, which is 11E2, please.
Okay, we have a motion to that effect. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11F. This is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 3401 East Britain Road, going from AA and R1 to PUD 1856. And Councilwoman Nice, just so you know, it looks like we have a protester who signed up.
Okay, I'd like to hear, is the developer here or representative? Okay. If you'll do me a favor and explain what's happening, and then we'll have the person who signed up to speak.
Yes, ma'am. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Jason Spencer, who is the civil engineer for the project, is also here with me. The application before you is for a PUD that would break this tract at I-35 and Britain into two separate tracts. The eastern tract being tract 2 would be C3, and the western tract being tract 1 would be I2. However, we have limited it to only 6 uses that would be allowed within that I2 tract. Additionally, since the time of Planning Commission, our client has been in contact with the individual that is here and has some additional concessions to offer. So what we're going to propose is a 50-foot building setback from the north, a 25-foot landscape buffer, along that northern line, and within that 25-foot landscape buffer, there will be an earthen berm. And on top of the earthen berm, we will be required to plant trees along that. So we're pulling the buildings back, we're adding trees on the berm in an effort to block it. Additionally, we have heightened facade requirements for the south and east facing buildings. We're also willing to add the facade treatment requirements to those north buildings as well that face to the north to those neighbors. So again, we've limited it to only 6 uses. We believe we have provided a manner to buffer that. The uses are, we believe, to be uses compatible with a full interchange there at I-35 in Britain. It was recommended for approval by staff as well as a planning commission even before those additional requirements that we're willing to agree to.
Thank you. If we can hear from.
Sure. Charlie Cashin? Mr. Cashin, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your address.
I'm Charlie Cashin, and I live at 3121 Harriet Street, the property immediately north of the Tract 1. Today I'm here, first of all, I'm sorry, I want to address all of you, Mayor and council members. I'm here on behalf of 8 families that live surrounding this development. I don't know if there are any more here. I know of one person, but if anyone else wants to stand up, I'll be happy to yield some time. We have, as you can imagine, with any diverse group, we have a number of objections to this development, but the one that we all have is the industrial zoning to facilitate warehouses in this Tract 1. It's not that I don't appreciate the things that the developer has done to try to mediate this, but we still are stuck with an idea that this property is surrounded by like 96% by residential properties. There is one small enclave of office buildings, 2 office buildings, that are on the southeast corner of Bryant and Britton Road. But of those families, we're all opposed to having this industrial zoning. That's the only industrial zoning anywhere around us. Everything else has been down on I-35, and we would hope to keep it down there. I guess I can make it real short and sweet. That is the only objection we have. We don't want one of these big tip-up concrete buildings plopped down, in my neighborhood. It's just hard for me to imagine how, if we had homes in the middle of Oklahoma City, we could tolerate a warehouse in the middle of that. And although we are residential, we have larger lot spacing and things, but we still don't want this ugly thing right in our neighborhood. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cashin. Were you all present at the Planning Commission meeting?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
But I had to leave just before this item came up to be considered to pick up my son at the airport. He came home for Thanksgiving, and I had no alternative.
Understood. What I would like to do is I would like a little more time to look at this, especially with the concerns. And I knew we had a legal protest looking at this. So I'm going to ask that we defer this for 2 weeks. And the reason I'm asking for that is I would like to meet with the neighbors and you all so we can have just an overall conversation. So I would like just to get a better understanding of what's taking place. So I'm going to ask that we defer this for 2 weeks and we can work to plan that meeting. And if we have to defer it again just due to time, we'll do that as well. So I'm going to ask that we defer it for 2 weeks and looking forward to talking to you all about it further.
Would you like my phone number or anything?
I'll get it from you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we've got a motion to defer item 11F for 2 weeks to February 15th. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, 11G was previously withdrawn, which brings us to 11H, which is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval. 9600 Northeast 150th, going from PUD 1323 to PUD 1860. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, this is to permit residential development, and I understand there were some TEs that were added to this particular development and zoning request. So I will move forward with the approval.
All right, we've got a motion and second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11I, this is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 3300 South Mustang Road, going from PUD 1350 to PUD 1861. Councilwoman Stubb. Young.
We'll get there.
Can somebody bring my coffee? The mayor needs his coffee.
Thank you, Mayor. Planning Commission recommended approval on this, subject to the summary of technical evaluation. There were no protests, and I make a motion to approve.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 11J. This is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 14801 North Morgan Road, going from AA to PUD 1862. Councilman Stonecipher.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah, this is an application by Central Oklahoma Habitat for Humanity. There has been many discussions about this application. It was approved by planning. I think, is Mr. Groves still here? Would you like to speak, since Mr. Groves represented some of the surrounding neighbors, and tell us about the results you reached, please?
Yeah, just briefly, Mayor and Council, Eric Groves for Stone Ridge Farms neighborhood to the immediate south of this proposal. We've spent the last year or two negotiating this PUD in an effort to make it compatible with the neighborhood to the south. The biggest problem we had was Morgan Road, which, as many of you may know if you've been out there, is a two-lane rural road that serves my client's neighborhood, but will also serve the new Habitat project. We did get it resurfaced, thanks to the assistance of Councilman Stonecipher, which is helpful, but these roads in areas like this really need to be four-laned, and hopefully the next GO bond project will include it. In any event, I want to thank Ann Felton with Habitat and David Box, my opponent, for helping me negotiate this arrangement, and of course Councilman Stonecipher. We look forward to having new neighbors to the north, particularly because the two neighborhoods will be compatible. So thanks to everybody who helped out.
Thank you, Mr. Groves. Appreciate you being here today. At this time, I'd move for approval of the item.
Okay. Item 11J. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 11K. This is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval. 19300 North May, going from PUD 1559 to PUD 1863. Councilman Stonecipher.
Yeah, this is an item, a rezone at 19300 North May Avenue. It's for mixed residential and commercial development. It was approved by the Planning Commission, and I'm aware of no protests, so I'll move for its approval at this time, please.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11L, this is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 13100 Memorial Springs Court, going from PUD 1745 to PUD 1865. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, is the applicant present? And I know there's already been some movement as far as dirt moving in this area, so if you'll clarify what's happening, and also I'm seeing an increase from 205 to 275 units, so an explanation of that growth.
Yes, Mark Grubbs, 1800 South Sarah Road, on behalf of the applicant. This is a small portion of a recently approved overall PUD that allowed for 205 units of multifamily residential on this tract. There's been an end user that has came to the table and expressed the need for 275 units for this overall, within the overall mixed use development. So we came back forth asking for that increase, but it wouldn't be out of compliance on the overall mixed use, but just for this portion, it's an increase in the density for this small portion of the overall mixed use development. So based on that, we came back and asked for your approval.
So I understand, and help me through this, because this is new for me to look at as well. So there's a total of 20 acres for this full development, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
There's a total of 20 acres for this,
There's
full project?
The overall development's approximately 20 acres.
Gotcha.
It includes the pond that's in the middle that's currently being renovated and both sides. So if you can see that, the big pond there, that's being renovated there. So it includes the overall north of that and east of that pond too, over to that auto repair area. So that's the overall mixed-use development, which a PUD was recently approved on.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and ask for approval. I do understand we have some amended TEs with the Planning Commission as far as reviewing and amending the screening, parking, garages, and the traffic circulation, so that I'm comfortable with that.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Mayor, my screen isn't doing that.
Okay, how do you wish to vote?
Yes.
All right.
You have nothing about what to do.
Passes unanimously. Councilwoman Hammond is marked as not voting, but she is present.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, how do you wish to vote? Or maybe we've reopened it. I'm already green.
Yeah. Is it just not showing up? I voted yes, if that helps.
Okay, there we go. Passes unanimously. All right, 11M, ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 1315 South MacArthur, going from PUD 1020 to PUD 1866. Councilwoman Young.
Thank you, Mayor. So Planning Commission recommended approval subject to summary of technical evaluations. There were no protests, so I'll recommend for approval. Move for approval.
All right. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11N is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 659 First Americans Boulevard, going from R1 and I3 to PUD 1867. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, this is a request to permit mixed-use development, and as we look at the location and what is taking place, I will say this, that it was voted to remove the Scenic River Overlay Design District from this particular development. And some of those uses have been incorporated in PUD 1867. Still a few questions and concerns, and I know we'll be able to work through a lot of those that I have. And looking forward to those conversations. I know, looking at some of the things that have been omitted as far as the explanation for the codes, there's still a few that I probably need some more guidance and explanation on. And I'm sure based on this, if we need to come back to it, we'll continue to work through it. So for today, I will move for this approval.
Okay, and real quick, someone did sign up to speak. Do you mind if I call them up?
Please.
Linda Koenig?
Good morning, Mayor and council members. Thank you for having me here. My name is Linda Koenig. My address is 6162 North Brookline Avenue, Oklahoma City, Ward 2. This is another kind of big deal for Oklahoma City, and I've been watching it as it's gone through several reviews with the Planning Commission, the Scenic River Review Committee, et cetera. And based on the dates that everything has happened and the related correspondence, I might be behind on some of my information. So part of what I have are questions. I see that the recommendation is for approval subject to the summary of the technical evaluation. So is the current proposal before the council saying we will accept the technical evaluation by the staff, or are there some variances
Yes.
from that?
Yes is the answer.
Okay, okay. So one of the things that it mentioned in particular was if the TE is deleted, continue the application in order to modify the design statement to include more specific language regarding architectural, lighting, screening, signage, and so forth. So I'm confused. Was the TE set aside and then specific information was included to address those issues in lieu of the TE?
I think, to your point, we can have them address that question for you.
Okay, okay.
And if you had any other questions?
Okay, sure.
Maybe just lay them all out, yeah, and then we can have them
Okay.
addressed all at once.
Okay, one of them that is kind of a subset of this is in the screening regulations, the description says screening for this PUD shall not be required as there are no residential and low impact uses that neighbor the site. My question related to that would be, is that true? Screening will not be required. And is it not the case that within the PUD, there are some possible residential or low impact uses that are allowable as land uses? My third question is in regards to the breakup, the exhibits show kind of a phase 1 and phase 2 in one bundle and then the future phases in another bundle. I'm interested in the apportionment of the acreage. I know the overall is around 121, but I'd be interested in knowing how much is in the future phases. My next question is any of this parcel included in a tax increment financing district? And then finally, as you may be able to tell, I am so happy with the development that has occurred in downtown and along the riverfront. I think the city has done a great job. There's been a lot of public and private partnerships. There's been a lot of support by MAPS. And I think there's been a lot of support by the wisdom and the scrutiny and the conversations by citizens. So I'm a little bit concerned about this moving forward in the interest of efficiency and returning tax money to the city, et cetera, with abandoning the process of the Scenic River Overlay District. I just think that there's something really useful that has occurred when many people shine their light and wisdom on a project, and this is a huge project, part of which we know quite a bit about, and part of which is kind of a future phase. So that's the summary of my comments.
And first, let me say thank you to you for your questions and your concerns. And I shared sentiment with you as far as removing these types of overlays for developments for particular uses. However, they will come forward and explain what, as far as the Scenic River overlay, they have used in this PUD. And that was of a concern for me as well, to help in my decision as far as how we move forward with this development. So I appreciate you, and if you'll come forward and answer the questions that you had pertaining to screening, residential and low impact uses, future phases, and that TIF district that she asked about.
Yes, thank you. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is Chad Claiborne, Jim Couch representing the Chickasaws, and Frank McBride with the developer. So to go to the questions, her question's spot on. There was a TE in the staff report to the Planning Commission, which requested that the project stay within the Scenic River overlay. We requested that TE be deleted, which it was, and then we added several additional TEs to the document as a result of the Planning Commission meeting and input from both the staff that we met with 2 or 3 times prior to Planning Commission, as well as input from the commissioners themselves. All of those items have been incorporated in the document that's before you today, and so it includes language that will basically allow the staff to make all the same reviews that they would under the Scenic River overlay. It's just eliminating the appearance before the board and the need to come back on minor changes during construction. And so that's really in a nutshell, that's kind of the only thing that comes apart from that. The rest of the review, the rest of the language that deals with how this gets developed is still in the document as part of the PUD. We've given the staff, the planning director, the authority in the PUD to review and have his staff review and make those comments that would normally be on behalf of the Scenic River overlay. And then with regard to the screening question, so because there is no, as you can see by this map, we're surrounded by industrial uses or riverfront. There are no residential uses, and the screening terminology that's in our zoning language has to do with fencing. Commonly, your site-proof fence between neighborhoods or between a commercial use and a neighborhood. In this particular case, because we do not have a residential use present, we're eliminating the need for additional fencing that would be really obnoxious for this kind of a project. We will be providing a tremendous amount of screening along the river and along First American Boulevard with our landscaping package. As you can see by this map, we have some of our key buildings are nestled up real close to the right-of-way on First American Boulevard. There will be screening along that because some of that is the back of the house, and there'll be a lot of screening there, but it's going to be taking place as landscaping, not a fence, not a site-proof wooden fence. And then as far as phase 1 and phase 2 and future, so the phase 1 and 2 combined is about 40 acres. The remainder of the tract, without inclusion of the museum tract itself, is between 55 and 60 acres. So that gives you kind of a scale of what we're attempting to develop in this first phase. We think that phase 2 will come online during the construction of phase 1. That's why we included it in this initial zoning document as previously approved. When we come back on future phases, we will submit to the staff like we typically do for a site plan review, and that'll go through all the normal processes and back to Planning Commission for them to review building styles, building locations, setbacks, elevations, and all those things to make sure that we are in conformance with the PUD.
Okay, and I think we had a couple other questions that you had as far as residential low-impact uses, future phases. You did speak on future phases, and she asked about a TIF district, so you can explain that as well to answer her questions for me, please.
Yes, the residential is included in the PUD. Currently, there's not any residential use proposed in our phase 1 and phase 2. There may or may not be residential uses proposed in our future phase. If they're developed, it'll be developed similar to a downtown residential development, either in a wrap project or something with a structured parking. Those kinds of residential uses typically do not fit into your low impact category. They're more multifamily or condominium design. I'm not the right guy to answer the TIF question, however. I might defer to our city manager.
Yeah, so the TIF district is something that's in place that will allow for us to be able to use property tax TIF. It also allows for sales tax TIF, and we're working through some of the issues of that, and that would be something that we come back to the council later on how we would detail that TIF plan.
So the answer to that question is yes, that it is in a TIF district. Okay, so did you have any other questions?
Well, I would like a little bit more enlightenment on the interaction of the TIF districts and the benefits or disadvantages of that to this area. It's my understanding that with a TIF district, that coverage is for a certain period of years, and that during that time, there is less benefit to the city and more of a kind of an assist to the developer. And then later on, that's abandoned and then the whole operation is kind of as normal. So I would be interested in the term of the TIF district and then maybe just a little explanation about how or why that was envisioned for this property.
Yeah, so the TIF districts are set up for 25 years, and it does allow you to take TIF. And the idea of TIF is like in an area that otherwise wouldn't be developed, that needs assistance, whether it's because of infrastructure needs or whatever else, that you're providing additional funding and you're temporarily setting aside that funding to go back towards the project to help with the project, and that's what this allows for.
Okay, so my comment would be, again, just as a form of education and reminder that there is sort of like an extra arm or a leg or something, an assist, a cane maybe, given to this area to get things up and running for 25 years in lieu of the TIF district, which the perception often is that without that, it would lay fallow or not develop in this area. It's my understanding, though, that part of the urgency of moving this forward and not having to have excessive delay time before the city council with further review is so that return of funds could be made expeditiously in the form of tax money to the city. Well, really, there's going to be somewhat of a delay in full development of the tax base for the city for this 25 years. Is that the case?
The TIF district will have an impact for 25 years once we decide exactly what portions that would be, but it would be on property tax and sales tax, and it would have an effect for 25 years.
Okay.
Directly in the TIF.
Okay, so that decision about the structure of that is not made at this point and will be made.
The TIF plan has been approved. The details of the structure of that is something that will come back.
Okay, so the distribution of funds could be, you said property tax, sales tax, or?
I believe right now it only allows for property tax, sales tax.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, Councilwoman Nice, earlier it sounded like you were ready to.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to, before I move forward, continue to move forward with my motion, I just want us to, again, be careful with what we're looking at as a scenic river overlay district and the removal of these types of districts and these overlays. Again, because this is going to set precedents in other ways, in other developments that we are also trying to spur in the area of this river and the developments that we want to see towards the river. So I will ask this, as listening to her questions and also understanding the concerns that I've had and questions about this process, because this is also a new process for me as far as this type of overlay being removed for this type of development that we're going to see. I would like to ask, and Mr. City Manager and for our planning director, for us to create some type of correspondence page as far as our city website is concerned, because this is a big development for our city. For us to be able to have a landing page for any updates as far as when something comes to Planning Commission or to the Planning Department pertaining to this development, because the original plan was that it would come to me and I would see this, but I would rather the public see it instead of it just coming to me. So therefore, when there are these types of same questions, that we can have them answered with transparency and openness on this page. And I know there's a way for us to do that, especially with this development everybody's watching. And I would hope that we would be able to move forward in that process in order for our community and our city and our residents to understand what's happening. Another thing that I did ask for also, and I know it's not mentioned specifically right now, this was in our overall conversations, is the fact of public transportation. Being able to connect this particular development in its entirety to our city, whether there's a route we have coming from downtown Oklahoma City, wherever that may be, to connect even our residents who will be working and employed at this particular place. Not only for that, to connect at this location, but to connect down the street at Crooked Oak. We have a school district right next to this property, not far from this property, that we would like to continue the efforts of public transportation, meeting the need, and also with that, getting our city and our communities out and about and realizing and understanding all of these places exist, and you can get public transportation to get there and experience it. So those were some of my other asks in this, but Mr. City Manager, and for our municipal council and our planning department, and also for the Okana, looking forward to us being able to ensure that this is the best development we have ever seen for the First Americans Museum area, and that we're also serving all of our residents in being able to answer those questions. So I will move it forward with those expectations that I just asked for. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Thank you, and it is a very exciting development. Thank you for all the work that's gone into it. Okay, 11O is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 7901 South Peebly Road, going from AA to PUD 1868. Councilman Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a PUD that's actually for the construction of an on-queue at the corner of I-40. I think it's the northwest corner of I-40 and Peebly Road. Unanimously recommended by the Planning Commission, so with that, I will move for its approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11P is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval 8820 South Pennsylvania, going from C3 to SPUD 1340. Councilman Greenwell.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a request to bring forward a SPUD, a plan unit development district. There was one protest, but after the filing of the protest by letter, the protester and the developer were able to resolve those concerns. Another business person spoke to me earlier this week about this, and those issues were resolved as well. So it was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission, and I recommend approval.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 11Q is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 316 Northeast 9th, going from PUD 1531 and PUD 1050 to SPUD 1354. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, this is for the Innovation District and the development that we've been hearing about in order for us to be able to do that SPUD for mixed office, commercial, and medical use. So this is just continuation of that. And as you see, this is still connected to our Capital Medical Zoning Association, Capital Medical Center Improvement and Zoning Commission. And that's the difficulty in being able to do a lot of these developments and protecting some of our residents that are within that capital medical zoning that we're looking at as far as our legislative issues for this upcoming session. So with that, we'll go ahead and move for approval.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Here it goes. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, 11R is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 2126 Northwest 16th, going from R1 to SPUD 1359. And Councilwoman Hammond, the applicant, is here. I don't know if they need to speak, but they did sign up.
Okay, yeah, if they're ready to go, why not? Let's hear from them about this project.
Yes, I am Saudi Knight with Knight Land Company on behalf of the applicants. This is unanimously approved from the Planning Commission, and basically just here to answer any kind of questions. We're seeking to, basically this is a R1. It's, we just need the permits to be able to redevelop the, it is a auxiliary dwelling unit kind of towards the back of the property. So it's just a single family home on a, just a standard residential lot and a auxiliary dwelling unit towards the back. All this was constructed in 1916, so we're just trying to bring it up to speed and up to code. No footprint. The foundation's going to be exactly the same. No roof or anything like that. We're not moving or extending any walls or anything like that. Just simply redeveloping to bring back up to like 2022 standards.
Well, we like to hear that for sure. And I know I'm excited to hear about the accessory dwelling unit allowance through this SPUD, and I hope that our code update will allow that to be a little easier and less cumbersome for folks who are wanting to update maybe a old garage or something in the back of their lots to make it a little easier to do that and get things all up to code. So I will move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11S is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 15200 Crown at Lone Oak Road from PUD 706 to SPUD 1360. Councilman Stonecipher.
Thank you, Mayor. This rezone was approved by Planning Commission on December 9th of 2021. There were no protests. I would say that this is the first time I've ever had anything like this before. It's a permit for a luxury pet hotel and spa, and it will be located at 150th near Portland Avenue. So with that, I'd move for approval at this time.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, item T. Was this previously deferred? Okay.
Yeah, stricken.
Stricken, okay. So that brings us to item U. 11U was an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 5725 South Harvey Court, going from R4 to SPUD 1364. Councilman Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. Has anyone signed up to speak on this item?
Actually, yes. The applicant,
Okay.
Cynthia Jimenez.
I think we're going to be good. It's recommended unanimously by the Planning Commission. It's for an auto repair shop, again located at 5725 South Harvey Court. If there's no questions, I'd go ahead and recommend it for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11V is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 10901 Northwestern, going from R1 to SPUD 1365. Councilman Cooper.
Yes, is the applicant, no, did you just literally say no one has signed up to speak?
I didn't,
Is anyone
but
signed
no
up
one
to
has signed up
speak?
to speak.
Okay. I have already spoken with the applicant, and they have given me context for what this is going to be. It's an event center, and they received approval, and so I would recommend approval as well when it happens.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11W is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval to close approximately 110 feet of a 15-foot wide drainage easement located at Northwest 23rd and John Kilpatrick Turnpike. This is in Ward 1, but Councilman Carter has stepped away. Does anybody down there want to step in? Okay.
I can.
So, don't fight over it. We'll go with Councilwoman Young.
Sure. Let's see. So Planning Commission recommended approval. Do we have anybody signed up to speak?
We do not.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11X, ordinance on final hearing to close 75-foot portion of the east-west alley in Block 3 of the Putnam Heights Edition, et cetera. Councilman Cooper.
Ward 2 again, I also spoke with the representative for the applicant yesterday evening about this particular area and why they're wanting to do this, and I would move for approval. Will move for approval even. There we go.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11Y, this is an ordinance on final hearing establishing a reserved parking space for the physically disabled on the east side of Northwestern Avenue near Northwest 10th. Councilwoman Hammond.
I will move for approval.
Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11Z, ordinance on final hearing establishing 90-degree angle parking in a setback parking area on the east side of South Laird near Southeast 5th. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I will move for approval. This was approved by our Traffic and Transportation Commission.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11AA, ordinance on final hearing establishing 7 reserved parking spaces for the physically disabled on the east side of South Laird near Southeast 5th. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, this is in the same area, so I'll move for approval.
Are other people seeing anything? Because I'm not. Okay, I'd like to vote aye. Passes unanimously. Okay. AB is an ordinance on final hearing that relates to the animal section of our code, specifically the authority of animal welfare officers to enter private property. This was presented on 2 meetings ago. The last meeting, there was a public hearing. Today is potential final consideration. No one has signed up to speak. What does the council wish to do with the proposed ordinance change?
I'll move for approval.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, AC, this is a public hearing regarding an ordinance change related to taxation, specifically the hotel tax. This was presented at the last meeting. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak today?
No, they haven't.
We will close this public hearing and move on to AD. This is a public hearing on a proposed ordinance change relating to vehicles for hire. This was presented at the last meeting as well, would be voted on at our next meeting potentially. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak under this public hearing?
No, they haven't.
Okay, we will close that public hearing then and move on to item AE1. This is the public hearing regarding the dilapidated structures here listed. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
So we will move, they have not, so we will move on to AE2, which is a resolution declaring that the structures are dilapidated. Got a motion and a second? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11AF1 is a public hearing regarding the unsecured structures here listed, except for those struck at the beginning of the meeting. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
So we will close the public hearing and move on to AF2, the resolution declaring that the structures are unsecured, which we could take a motion on. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. AG1 is a public hearing regarding the abandoned buildings here listed, except for those struck at the beginning of the meeting. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
So we'll close the public hearing and advance to AG2, which is the resolution declaring that the buildings are abandoned. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item AH was previously deferred to our next meeting, which brings us to item AI. This is a resolution authorizing the incurrence of indebtedness by the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust by the issuance of one or more series of its drinking water state revolving fund promissory notes to Oklahoma Water Resources Board in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $31,645,000, et cetera. I believe we have a presentation, Mr. City Manager.
Vanessa Aguilar, the business manager for the Utilities Department, is here to give us a presentation on this authorization of indebtedness.
All right, good morning, Mayor and Council. The resolution item that you have before you today is authorization for Aquit to incur indebtedness for a loan with the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. This provides $31.6 million in funding for water improvements at Draper, Hefner, and water line replacements. Of significant note with this item, this provides up to $1.1 million in loan forgiveness through the DEQ's program that they've recently announced with their loan forgiveness program. And with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Well, then we can take a motion to adopt the resolution. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes, and 6 affirmative votes are required to incur indebtedness. Resolution passes unanimously and with the required 6 votes. All right, item 11AJ1 is a collective bargaining agreement with the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 123, for the fiscal year 2021-2022, effective July 1st, 2021. I believe you have a brief public presentation on this.
Yes, Amy Madera, our Chief Human Resources Officer, is just going to give us a quick update. This is something that we had discussed previously in executive session, and I'll just let Amy give us a quick update on this.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Amy Madera, HR Department. The resolution before you is for the collective bargaining agreement for the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 123, for fiscal year 2021 and 22, effective July 1st. Just a reminder of the timeline. On December 23rd, we discussed the draft collective bargaining agreement via executive session. On December 21st for the executive session. The FOP board did, the executive board approved, and then the members voted on their and ratified on between January 12th and January 19th, and was approved by the FOP members. A few key changes for this contract. It was a 4.3 plan adjustment that will be retroactive to July 1, 2021. A 4.3% increase in longevity schedule based onto the pay plan. Then the annual insurance premium renewals, and then we had the addition of Juneteenth holiday for all personnel. And we had updates to the process for vacancies within the Investigations Bureau. And then we had an update with the wage methodology in order to make sure that we're updating, comparing more apples to apples. And then the other changes that we had were more around various date changes. We did go have gender neutral language, and then just staff title changes, for example, changing personnel director to chief HR officer. Those are the key changes for the contract. We did receive notice to negotiate for the FOP today, and so we'll continue bargaining. We'll pick up, provided that it is approved by council, then we will pick up and start the negotiations all over again. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mayor, I was the council representative during these collective bargaining negotiations, and I just wanted to comment that I thought, as an observer, that everybody was engaged, everybody worked hard, everybody got along, and I thought it was a good, productive process. And I'd like to move for approval of this at the appropriate time.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Was somebody else about to speak? Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone's work on this item. Unfortunately, I won't be able to support it at this time because I do not believe that this contract gets us where we need to be and where we've been working for the last 2 years. You know, as I've spoken many times from this horseshoe, at my request, I have attended trainings that are for trauma-informed policing, use of force training. I've gone on ride-alongs for both Hefner and Spring Lake Division. I've stated numerous times that I believe in good pay and benefits for public employees. And I don't want anyone to take this vote as me devaluing working people's work, because I believe in the dignity of work. But there are too many things that will come before this council as recommendations on how to make sure that our law enforcement officers are safe while they're doing their job, and so to our neighborhoods. And this contract does not meet those goals at this moment. And so I'm going to continue that work, and just wanted to state that for the record. So,
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, it sounds like you can make that motion now. We've got it. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes 6-2. AK1 is a resolution authorizing the municipal councilor to confess judgment without admitting liability in the case of Jagers and Johnson, attorneys at law, v. City of OKC. Executive session is not requested.
I would like to go into executive session. Oh, wait, yes. on this item. I would like to move to go into executive session, I guess.
Okay.
Want
All
to learn
right.
more.
Then we will take a motion then on 11AK2. Got a motion and a second?
That's the $1,000.
What happened to it? There we go. Okay. Motion and a second. Cast your votes to go into executive session. Passes unanimously. We'll handle that at the end of our other business and potentially come back for a vote on AK1. Okay, that brings us to AL1, claims recommended for approval. Executive session is not requested. We could approve the claims as a group, A through F. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 12, items from council, Ward 2.
Yes, I think probably the two important things I would want to note is that today is the first day of Black History Month, and you know, I have the honor of serving, we think, as the first teacher on council, but also as the first biracial or Black council member outside of Ward 7. And the name that always stands out to me that we don't learn so much about in middle school, high school, just anywhere in K through 12, is a man by the name of Richard Allen. I've spoken about him previously from this council, but I just want to keep speaking his name into existence because I think what he set in motion for our country is so important. As my fellow councilors might recall, Richard Allen, before he took on the last name Allen, they called him Negro Richard. And he finds himself caught up in a spirit of religious revival at the time, the Methodist, and becomes a Methodist, goes to his slave owner, and keep in mind at the time, if one tried to escape from slavery, it was your toes were getting cut off, your fingers, you faced castration. It was not easy to get away. Richard spoke to his slave master and figured out a bit of a remedy to that problem by turning to his slave master and saying to him, "You will go to hell if you do not free me. It is against the will of God, this institution called slavery." And it put such a fear in that man that he actually freed Richard. And Richard goes to the capital of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia at the time, goes there and goes to speak at a church. And while he's there, he learns that he cannot sit, and it really strikes me being in the chambers this morning and seeing these pews, might help everyone visualize it up on the council, but he sits at the front, but the white leadership of the church tells him he can't do that, that it might be one thing to be a free man in the North, but he is not equal. That's the stated message, and that he must go sit in the balcony, and that's where black folk must sit. And, you know, Richard, who had now adopted the last name Allen for himself, prayed on it, like any good Christian would do, and decided, okay, I'll get up. And he gets up, walks out, and the story goes he never looked back. Because now with his good friends, they will build America's first black church out of necessity, right? The AME Church, which endures to this day. In fact, one of its most famous members that we know of today We will be celebrating her day this Friday, and that's Rosa Parks. She was an AME member. AME has congregations worldwide to this day, thousands of congregations, in fact. That's the endurance of doing the right thing. He led this country's very first sit-ins. Not only would Rosa then go onto a bus and say, I will not sit at the back, I will sit with dignity at the front. Not only does that happen, but lo and behold, that's how we get history teacher Clara Looper right here in Oklahoma City and her students. So because of those sit-ins that Richard led, we have Rosa Parks. We have Rosa Parks Day. We have our city buses desegregated where black folk do not have to face the indignity of being separated at the back of a bus. And I just think that's so important to tell that history. Speaking of buses, I think it was very fascinating to learn that this Route 8 that Embark has, and I just have this print off that I had requested that Embark Director Fairbrush share with us after he shared the good news of increased ridership to Route 18. For those of you who don't know, Route 18 goes from downtown along Lincoln, along the Capitol, straight north in this sort of way, all the way up to Britain, which very likely is about to become the new north corner, or excuse me, north boundary of Ward 2. When we increased the frequency for this route during the week from 60 minutes to 30 minutes, in other words, every time you're at a stop, a bus that's going to be there every 30 minutes to get you to recreation, to work, to school. 59.69% increase in ridership. That's incredible, and I really want to congratulate Embark for their advocacy, my fellow transit trustees for their advocacy, this council for approving this funding. This is critical, and I'll conclude with this fact. There will be times in the weeks and months and years ahead where people will try to make the argument, a chicken versus the egg argument, just to keep the chicken conversation going today. They will tell you that we don't need to increase funding for public transportation because the ridership is not there. And I'm here to tell you that it's the precise opposite. When you make those investments in public transportation, services like increasing the frequency, the people will come. And the good news is this 59.69% increase in ridership. The two pieces of bad news is that on the weekends, it's still an hour between the next bus coming to get you to where you need to go. The other bad news is we know from research, sound research, it's every 15 minutes or less. That is what reliable public transportation looks like. And this city needs to desperately make those investments over the next 10 years, particularly as the new maps for bus rapid transit systems come online on the east side of our city and on the south side. And I don't envy this council and city manager for finding those funds, but we got to find them because our people's livelihoods, as it turns out, depends on them. And yeah, so I just want to say happy Rosa Parks Day, happy Black History Month. It's an honor to serve in this position and to speak to that history. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. My only comments today are going to be briefly in regards to an item that was deferred at our last council meeting, SP 550. Just an update for citizens that have reached out to city staff. And first, let me appreciate city staff, Beverly, James, Boyd, and Debbie for the hundreds of calls and emails that they have assisted in responding to and communicating with our citizens on this very highly visible matter. I really appreciate all of their help on that. We have returned many calls and just made many contacts. Our next step in that process, in discussions with the applicant and the opposition, is to hold a community meeting. We're still looking for the location to be able to do that. That is within, close by, is what we're looking for right now. The applicant had indicated that they are very happy to do that, and opposition's very happy to attend as well, and we will make sure that we get all of the information and all of the questions answered by both parties through that, through that interaction. The other thing I want to talk about just real briefly, Councilman Burge Cooper and Greenwell, involvement as this particular case is coming about. I really appreciate everybody's questions and commitment of time and getting educated about all aspects of the development that's being considered. Mr. Eccles, Matt Eccles with the South Lakes Soccer Club attended a tour on Friday as well. So we had conversations at that time, let him know that we were planning this community meeting coming up so that we can just make sure that all of our citizens really have the facts of the matter and make that available to them. So as soon as we have the dates around that, we will get that public notice out so that everybody can try and join us out there. And that's all I have today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Ward 4? Ward 6?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to say thank you to Assistant City Manager Kenny Soodle and all the staff who were present and worked on the redistricting virtual town hall that was held last Monday. I just really appreciate their efforts to make it as accessible as possible and just all the work they've done to make that information public. I know there was also the last Thursday, the opportunity for folks to go and talk directly with staff one-on-one. So I just, again, appreciate all the work they've been doing and making that a transparent and open process and opportunity for residents to engage in the process and provide some feedback. And then I also want to just give a shout out and thank you to our Embark bus drivers and just all the work, any other staff who've been involved in coordinating, getting folks that are getting to cold weather shelters. I actually got a message from one of the directors of the shelters just saying, whatever you can do to say thank you to them. They've just taken that on themselves and working to make sure that folks stay safe in our inclement weather, especially knowing that this week seems to be some bad, particularly low temperatures. Just really appreciate all the work that they've been doing and just, again, taking it on themselves to really care for some folks that are really in vulnerable places and get them to the right shelter so they can stay safe, warm, and alive. So appreciate all the work they do and just for going above and beyond.
Thank you. Ward 7?
Yes, I'm glad she mentioned that. I actually want to also commend our bus drivers. A couple weeks ago, I was able to serve. It was 6:30 in the morning with a couple of local churches at the shelter as they were letting out. They let out at 6:30 in the morning, for those who did not know, from overnight stay for single folks and then families around 7:30. But to see the patience of the bus drivers waiting for them to make sure they got on as they were all exiting that night stay, it means a lot to know that they are caring in the manner that they are for those who need some grace in this space. So I wanted to talk about a couple things here. First of all, Friday, wanted to say thank you to our Oklahoma City Thunder. They do on Friday home games, they acknowledge districts. In this particular Friday, they acknowledged East End District, which is in Northeast 23rd Street, like the East Point development. And there was a great little article about the district itself and also about Miss Florence. So if you have not been to Florence's, please go, because that is a history maker in itself, the restaurant and Miss Florence, because she was
She's been doing this since 1957, and she still cooks in her 90s in the kitchen. And this is the most amazing thing, that she comes out with her apron and her smock on and greets everyone. It's just awesome. And speaking of that, there is a Black History Month contest that the Thunder is also having, and that is through, I believe, for the next couple weeks. So you will have to go to their website to find out more information. I wanted to thank our city representatives, as well as Metro Tech and Northeast Renaissance, for their assistance. On Tuesday, we had a community meeting that was online, and I know we had the redistricting process the day before, but graciously, we were able to get them to come and talk about it again the next day, pertaining to the happenings and things that are going on in our community. I also wanted to personally thank our city staff. We had Amanda Carpenter, Brent Bryant, and Kathy O'Connor on a call for a community meeting that some neighbors and our residents in Northeast Oklahoma City, I promised them a follow-up meeting so they could have information that they needed, and our city staff so graciously came to answer those questions virtually, and I wanted to thank them for taking their time out to be with us on that day, yesterday, for that hour. Can I say Elton John was so good? It was so good. I know people were like, why are you here? I like Elton John too. It was a great show, had a great time, but I do want to express one concern, and I was actually just talking to Councilmember Stonecipher about it before. Parking, the parking garage. We have a brand new parking garage, and I am very concerned about the possibilities of when this new development comes that is being built right next to it, in those parking spaces that we've been talking about before we agreed, and as we agreed, those who did for this development to move forward, because they will be taking up parking places in this garage. So the first 2 floors are dedicated to the Omni and the Convention Center. So I'm assuming those second couple floors, because there's 6, will be going towards the efforts of this development, because I believe they're going to have about 200 parking places for their development. So that leaves not that many for others of the city or just general parking to be able to occupy this public parking garage. And I sat in that parking garage for an hour on Sunday trying to get out from the concert. So I was tired yesterday, but I listened to a whole album. I did. I listened to a whole album, and I just sang in the car. But these are valid frustrations, I'm sure, and concerns as we're looking at these types of parking garages and who they actually benefit. So I want us to really consider and look at how we're moving through with that. Coming up for Black History Month, just a few of those things that are happening. Happy Black History Month to everyone. Cheryl Brown Henderson, the daughter of Mr. Brown for the Brown versus Board of Education, she will be at Oklahoma Christian on February the 7th. So if you have not been to a History Speaks, they are absolutely amazing. That's my favorite time of the year to spend on the campus of Oklahoma Christian, to hear and to see these living names and stories that I wasn't alive to understand or know about, but now to have reference from either the person who was involved or a family member. And speaking of other Black history, wanted to commend for our own city. We have Black history that was made, should I say, for our new risk management manager, Levita Breath, and she is the first African American to hold this position as far as a manager is concerned in our risk management department. So I definitely wanted to commend her for that. And if you had not heard on yesterday, Dr. Matra Stanley Jones is now the official president and first female and woman of color at Oklahoma City Community College. What an awesome thing to be able to talk about on the first day of this month. We had a community meeting as far as Jewel Theater. So this is my Black History fact to you before I leave. Thank you to all of those who came out. We had Concordia here. But here's the Black history fact, and I want y'all to connect this. Percy James in the 1920s created J-Cola. J-Cola was similar to Coca-Cola. He also had strawberry beverages, and he made a peach and I believe a blueberry of all of these drinks. The reason he had to create this in his own bottling company, and he created his bottling company on 2nd Street, not far from Calvary Baptist Church, but he had to do that because Coca-Cola would not deliver to the African American community. So he created J-Cola, and he delivered it in Langston, Ardmore, other places in the southern part of our state, as well as in Texas. He also built theaters. These theaters, he created a couple of theaters. I believe I read Ardmore. I could be mistaken, but he did build a couple of theaters. One in particular on 4th Street, named after his daughter, Jewel, the Jewel Theater. So in the 1950s, he still had his bottling company, but eventually he sold it to Knee-High. So if you drink Knee-High strawberry, I'm pretty sure it will probably have the same method of bottling from J-Cola. I'm just confident in that when you drink strawberry Knee-High, and it is so good. So I wanted to leave that good Oklahoma and Deep Deuce Black History fact with you on today. Happy Black History Month.
Thank you. Ward 8.
I don't know if somebody mentioned this while I was off the horseshoe, but my thoughts and prayers go out to Councilman Bradley Carter, who lost his father last week. I just wanted his family to know we're thinking about him. Thank you.
Of course.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Just one more thing. If I did not say this, the universe would strike me down right now. My mother's birthday was on the 30th. She's 78, and I just want to say happy birthday, Cloyce Cooper. Enjoy retirement, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes comments from council. Item 13 is citizens to be heard. No citizens have signed up to speak. And before we go into executive session, the city manager has what I will call a point of personnel privilege.
Yeah, so I asked Bob to come in here, Bob Teener. So Bob is retiring. This is Bob's last meeting at council. Bob's been with the city for 40 years. He'd be 41 in May, right? So if he hangs in there, if we could talk him into just a few more months, he could make 41. But I just wanted to acknowledge Bob. Bob is one of those unsung heroes that he's out there. I mean, he's dealt with a lot of tough issues through the years, and has been development services director for a number of years now, actually since we developed the department, created the department, and dealing with animal welfare issues and code enforcement, and then the planning side of it too. And I just really appreciate Bob's leadership, his dedication. Just been great for the city, and I just wanted to publicly acknowledge him and say thank you for your service to the city.
Well, one thing I'd like to say, Mayor, if I might, I'd also like to say that since 2015, every time I've called Bob, he's never said this can't be done. He's always figured out a way to get it done, and he well deserves his time on the golf course. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you, my friend.
And I'll say this too. When I was first elected, he picked me up in his truck and took me around to see all the spaces. So thank you, and I appreciated that soft rock that you were playing in your truck as well.
All right, thank you, Bob. We are now going to go into executive session to discuss item 11AK1, and we will return for a potential vote on that item. Okay, we have returned from executive session, and we still have a pending vote on item 11AK1, resolution authorizing the municipal councilor to confess judgment without admitting liability in the case of Jagers and Johnson v. City of OKC. What does the council wish to do with the resolution? Got a motion and a second? Cast your votes. Oh, are you logged out? Councilwoman Nice votes aye. Passes unanimously. That concludes our business. We're at item 14, adjournment, and we are adjourned.